It wasn't just another horror movie. It was a dare, a descent into the beautiful, the grotesque, and the forbidden. It tore open a door no one else would touch.
I said, don't.
Fusing art with agony, pleasure with pain, and turning monsters into something holy. Behind every scream was invention, latex, madness, and precision. A director learning to play God with flesh and film. These are the 20 weird and unforgettable secrets behind Hellraiser, a movie that raised hell and never shut the door again. Number 1. The most unglamorous, bizarre piece of Hellraiser trivia, the backbone of many of its special effects, was condoms and lube. Latex condoms, because they were stretchy, durable, and could mimic the thin translucence of skin. Lube, because it gave everything that unnerving wet sheen under bright set lights. The crew would sneak out to corner stores, loading up baskets full of props that looked more suited for a wild weekend than a horror movie. They'd melt condoms, stretch them over prosthetic wounds, and coat the creatures in lubricant until they gleamed. Under red gels and flickering shadows, those materials turned into pulsating veins, twitching muscle, and slick, glistening flesh. The next time you see a chain sliding through blood, remember, that glimmer of human suffering began with latex, lubricant, and imagination. Number 2. The Cenobite designs came straight from Barker's sketchbook and from his nights wandering through London's underground BDSM clubs. There, he saw art in agony. Men pierced, chained, sculpted by discipline and desire. Those sights fused into Pinhead's aesthetic.
Yeah, sure.
Black leather, symmetry, ritual. The makeup team translated those sketches into reality, often using real metal fasteners, zippers, and leather harnesses purchased from fetish shops. They even borrowed tools from tattoo parlors and surgical supply stores to achieve the look. The result was both erotic and horrific, a collision of sacred and profane. Barker later said, "The Cenobites aren't monsters. They're artists who found their medium, and their art was flesh." Number 3. The birth of Hellraiser didn't happen in a studio. It happened at a dinner party. Clive Barker had just finished directing a short film when a friend casually asked what his next project. Barker smiled, lifted his wine glass, and said, "Something about demons who don't know they're evil." That single sentence became the movie's soul. He wanted creatures who were neither angels nor monsters, just explorers of experience, pleasure, pain, and everything in between. By dessert, Hellraiser was already alive. An unholy child of fine wine and dangerous imagination. Number 4. When Hellraiser was finished, Barker thought he'd made an intense but artful horror movie. The MPAA disagreed. They slapped it with an X rating. Then, the death sentence for mainstream distribution. To avoid being buried, Barker was forced to cut multiple frames from nearly every violent scene. Hooks tearing flesh, chains pulling skin, even a kiss that lingered too long. The censors said it looked too erotic.
To show you.
Barker later joked that the MPAA had a problem with pleasure, not pain. Still, even after edits, the film remained extreme enough to shock audiences. What's fascinating is how the censorship helped the tone. Every quick cut, every truncated moment of violence added tension. The horror became suggestive, psychological. The stuff you didn't see hurt more than what you did. Sometimes restraint bleeds louder than gore. Number 5. Before settling on Hellraiser, Barker and the studio flirted with extremely edgy and provocative titles. One such suggestion, Sadomasochists from Beyond the Grave. Another, offered by an older woman on set, was What a Woman Will Do for a Good Yes, that one actually got floated. These names, Barker later confessed, had an artistic cheek, but the studio nixed them, fearing a direct box office death sentence. Hellbound Heart was also considered, but was rejected for sounding too romantic. The studio wanted sharp, fearless. The eventual title, Hellraiser, struck a balance. Evocative, brutal, defiant, and so a legend was christened. Number 6. Despite creating one of horror's most grotesque films, Clive Barker wasn't immune to his own imagery. During the scene where Frank's body reassembles from blood and sinew, Barker reportedly had to step off set to keep from vomiting.
Oh my god!
The mix of melting wax, slime, and animatronic fluid combined with the heat from the lights created a smell that one crew member described as rotting meat left in a sauna. Barker returned a few minutes later, pale but grinning. "If it makes me sick," he said, "we're doing it right." That moment defined his philosophy. If horror didn't make the creator squirm, it wasn't real enough for the audience to feel. Number 7. One of Hellraiser's most disturbing sequences, the resurrection of Frank from the floorboards, wasn't done with CGI or even early computer morphing. It was old-school practical magic. Effects artist Bob Keane built a wax model of Frank's corpse and filmed it melting backward. Then they reversed the footage in post, creating the illusion of flesh rebuilding itself from ooze. But the real genius came from sound designer Jeffrey Lawrence. He recorded the sounds of vegetables squishing, glue stretching, and even water balloons popping near a microphone. The mix was so revolting that crew members gagged while watching. That reverse resurrection wasn't just a visual trick, it was biology and rewind. A nightmare that looked alive because every part of it was wet, handmade, breathing through artifice. Number 8. The set of Hellraiser wasn't built on a studio lot. It was filmed inside an actual abandoned house in North London. The place was half rotted, soaked through with damp, and stank of mildew and plaster. By week 2, the heat from lights and prosthetics glue made the smell unbearable. The walls literally began to sweat. Crew members called it the house that bled. To keep the actors alive in there, production installed air scrubbers and fans. But the damage was done. The actors remember leaving every night covered in fake blood and real dust. When you watch the film and feel that sense of rot, that humid decay, it isn't art direction. It's the real environment. Barker wanted the setting to feel like the house was alive, rotting from the inside out. The irony is, it really was. Number 9. One of Hellraiser's most unforgettable images is Skinless Frank, the half-reborn man crawling from the attic floorboards. But that grotesque version of Frank wasn't played by actor Sean Chapman, who portrayed Frank in human form. The credit belongs to Oliver Smith, a slender British actor cast specifically because his lean frame allowed the makeup team to layer prosthetics and muscle effects convincingly. Smith endured hours in the chair each day as artists applied gelatin, latex, and fake sinew directly to his body. He could barely move, and the glue often tore at his skin when removed. The effect, though, was mesmerizing. His skeletal performance sold the illusion of pain and rebirth. Beneath all the gore, Hellraiser's most shocking creature was powered by pure human endurance. Number 10. Doug Bradley's makeup took nearly 6 hours to apply, and that famous grid of nails wasn't glued all at once. It was hand-measured every single day. Each pin sat inside a square carved from latex, perfectly symmetrical. The challenge? Latex stretches. So when Bradley moved his face, the grid would warp, and suddenly Pinhead's geometry was crooked. The crew started using blue pencils and rulers to redraw the grid mid-shoot, trying to keep the illusion intact. Sometimes they had to remove every pin and replace them, restarting hours of work for one close-up. Bradley's patience became legendary. He barely spoke during application, conserving energy like a monk. By the end of production, he'd spent more time in the chair than out of it. The irony. The most disciplined monster on set was the man trapped beneath the nails. Number 11. Hellraiser was Clive Barker's feature film debut, and he freely admits he winged parts of it. He once said that during production, he didn't even know the difference between a 10mm lens and a 35mm lens, and that someone could have shown him a plate of spaghetti and called it a lens, and he might have believed it. Yet the cast and crew treated his inexperience with kindness. In Barker's words, their patience allowed him to grow. That vulnerability, of a first-time director grasping for control, bleeds into the film's texture. Too perfect to be mechanical, too raw to be safe. Number 12. The movie you saw wasn't the movie they recorded. Hellraiser was shot in England, with an almost entirely British cast, but the studio worried the accents would alienate American audiences. So they did something bizarre. They dubbed some of the actors with American voices.
It smells damp.
Well, it's,
You can actually see it if you look closely. The lips and words don't always match. Claire Higgins, Julia, was spared, but several supporting actors weren't so lucky. Barker hated it. He felt the dub stripped the film of its strange British texture, and in some scenes, the mismatched voices make the dialogue feel uncanny, out of sync with the world, disembodied, dreamlike. It's fitting in a way. Hellraiser became a movie about people possessed by something alien, and their very voices proved it. Number 13. The Lament Configuration, the film's mysterious puzzle box, was handcrafted by British artist Simon Sayce, who treated it as a sacred object rather than a simple prop. Working with production designer Bob Keane, Sayce designed and etched each brass panel by hand, using acid baths and geometric templates inspired by classical symmetry. In interviews, he described wanting the cube to feel ancient and perfect, as though it had existed long before the film. Every design choice, from its repeating star patterns to the brass and wood contrast, was intentional, built to suggest forbidden craftsmanship. Sayce kept the original etching plates and reference materials for decades, proud that his creation became one of horror cinema's most enduring icons, a doorway built from precision and imagination. Number 14. Doug Bradley, the man beneath the pins, faced one of the biggest challenges any horror actor can endure. He could barely see. His heavy black contact lenses, part of the Pinhead design, left him almost completely blind during filming. Imagine maneuvering through a dimly lit set filled with cables, steps, and dripping prosthetics while wearing a leather priest's robe that weighed like armor. He often missed marks, stumbled on stairs, or nearly tripped over camera rigs, forcing the crew to guide him between takes. That restriction, his stillness, his deliberate pacing, became part of the character. Pinhead's eerie calm, that priest-like composure, wasn't just performance, it was survival. Even when Bradley's world was a blur, his voice carried power, precision, and presence. In the end, Blindness became his method, transforming limitation into legend.
What shall we drink to?
Number 15, Claire Higgins, who played Julia, was the real villain of Hellraiser, and she hated horror movies. She admitted she'd never even seen one before taking the role, but once cameras rolled, Higgins transformed. She was cold, controlled, magnetic, channeling fury through a single stare. Barker once said she could kill with an eyebrow, yet off camera she struggled with the gore. She refused to look at playback footage from the bloodier scenes, fearing it would make her laugh instead of scream. Her saving grace was the script. Julia wasn't scared, she was hungry. The irony is delicious. The woman most uncomfortable with horror became its most elegant predator, turning disgust into performance and discomfort into dominance. Number 16. Barker originally wanted the industrial band Coil to soundtrack Hellraiser. Their early recordings drew from dark ambient, brutal noise, ritual soundscapes, a sonic match for the movie's themes, but New World Pictures balked. Coil's audio was deemed too harsh for mass release, too abrasive for mainstream ears, so Christopher Young was hired as a backup, and his score became the film's official musical voice. Barker later described Coil's rejected version as making his bowels churn. The discarded score remains a kind of underground legend, what might have haunted the film if courage had matched ambition. Number 17. Hellraiser may be one film, but it lived many lives overseas. When it was released internationally, censors and translators struggled to handle the title's religious overtones. In France, it became Le Pacte, The Pact. In Mexico, Puerta al Infierno, Door to Hell. In Japan, Hellraiser, Hell's Apostle. Some distributors even rewrote taglines to soften the word hell, fearing backlash from religious authorities. Posters were redrawn, omitting Pinhead's nails and replacing them with abstract designs or fire motifs. Yet in every translation, one idea endured: the lure of the forbidden. Each culture reshaped the story to fit its own fears, turning a small British horror film into a global myth, a universal language of pain, temptation, and curiosity that transcended words. Number 18. Years after Hellraiser's release, Doug Bradley, forever known as Pinhead, began attending horror conventions. What surprised him most weren't the screams, but the tears. Fans would approach him in full costume, some even confessing that Pinhead helped them confront trauma, addiction, or grief. One fan said, "You taught me that pain doesn't have to mean defeat." Bradley moved, said the role that once trapped him had become a strange form of ministry. He was never just a monster, Bradley reflected. He was a philosopher of agony. That quiet transformation, from a cinematic demon to a symbol of endurance, closed the circle. Pinhead began as the priest of pain, and somehow ended as a preacher of survival. Number 19. The name Pinhead wasn't Clive Barker's idea. It was a joke that got out of hand. On set, the crew needed an easy nickname for the lead Cenobite, whose real title in the script was simply lead Cenobite. Someone started calling him Pinhead, and the nickname stuck through production. Barker never liked it. He felt it made the character sound cartoonish, undermining the regal, priest-like menace he'd imagined. Still, once audiences embraced the name, there was no turning back. It became iconic. In later works like The Scarlet Gospels, Barker rechristened him the Hell Priest, trying to restore the dignity he'd lost, but pop culture had already chosen otherwise. Number 20. When Hellraiser finally made its way to television, it was gutted beyond recognition. Network censors slashed nearly every frame of nudity, profanity, and gore, turning Barker's symphony of pain into a stitched-up corpse of its former self. Entire sequences of chains, hooks, and skin ripping were replaced with awkward reaction shots. Characters screamed at nothing, and Frank's resurrection became a few wet noises under ominous music. Barker called the edit a moral lobotomy. Yet ironically, fans found it hilarious. This new version, half horror, half farce, gained its own cult following. It proved that even stripped of blood, Hellraiser could still disturb, just in a whole new, unintentionally comedic way. From condoms to censors, from the smell of decay to the philosophy of pain, Hellraiser wasn't built in Hollywood. It was built in obsession. Every frame bled with devotion. Every scream whispered a question. How far would you go for art? If you loved diving into the dark with us, hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell for more twisted tales from iconic frights. And tell us below, which horror film should we tear open next?